All right, welcome to chapter 10. Today we take a look at organizational change and innovation. Let's get right into it. We start today by taking a look at our 6 learning objectives. So a little bit nicer to us than the chapter 9, where we had to parse out through 9 different learning objectives. Today we only are dealing with 6, or rather this week only dealing with the 6. So as you guys work through your projects, be sure you're taking a look at these PowerPoints, the book. Uh, Super helpful. There's a lot of great examples this week. So when going through and making questions, it's always easier to lean on examples within these projects. And quite honestly, when we get to quiz and test time, there's some really interesting examples for some of the stuff that you're going to see with these learning objectives. So I highly recommend, as you're studying this chapter, as you're making your questions for your projects, as you're reading the chapter, take a look at those examples. And I think you'll find you'll retain the information a little bit better. So as we first take a look here, as we get into 10-1, we take a look here at some big picture ideas. We take a look at fundamental change. What will you be called on to deal with? We also take a look at the 2 types of change, reactive and proactive, and the forces of change, or the forces for change, outside and inside the organization. You'll find that whether it be professors, managers, however long you continue your journey, a lot of times they will say the only thing constant in business is change. And I think you guys have lived through a unique time in history where you have seen rapid fire change here in just the last, three or so years, with how businesses have conducted themselves in the marketplace, and really how they've tried to reach their individual consumers. So you guys have a unique perspective in this chapter of living through this stuff, living through rapid technological advancements, living through rapid, direct to consumer process. But you've also seen some of the growing pains with what rapid change can do in terms of higher inflation, in terms of supply chain issues, which we'll get a little bit into. So this chapter, really draw on your own experiences. Think about your own experiences. Think about where you've been the last 2 or 3 years, and ultimately, I think you'll find a lot of commonality in this chapter. So fundamental change, what will you be called on to deal with? So the marketplace is becoming more segmented and moving towards niche products. So gone are sort of the days of mass marketing and mass development of products. People, and this is going to sound obvious, but people are different. People, while they share certain commonalities and certain interests, we're becoming a much more individualized society, in that we don't necessarily want the mass produced vehicle. We don't necessarily want you know mass produced food. We very much want our niche products, or the little add-ons, or the little add-ons, or the different types of food. Think about, like, the rise in, like, organic and gluten-free. This wasn't something that was really in the forefront of the fray 20 years ago. We're becoming more segmented with how we consume our products and services, and we're moving towards more what we call niche products. And that's one thing that businesses have really had to contend with. Is you know gone are the days of mass production. Everybody's going to drive, the same, Ford truck, sorry, Chevy lovers, or the same Chevy car, sorry, Ford lovers. It's one of those things where, people like their customizations, and they certainly like more niche products. So becoming more segmented, um, businesses are aware of that, though, and they've had to deal with that and respond. Our second fundamental change: more competitors are offering targeted products, requiring faster speed to market. So along with that more niche, more segmented population, businesses have gotten better. The information that they've been able to collect on their customers and potential customers has been so good over really in the internet age that they've now been able to offer targeted products to people. And with the rapid fire change that we're dealing with, and just the um, era that we're in, where we want stuff, we want stuff instantly, we want stuff quickly. It's got to be fast. It's got to be fast. To the market. It's in development, and all it's got to be on the market quick. And this hasn't that wasn't necessarily always the case. Where to be honest with you, people were a little bit more patient, 25, 35, 40 years ago. Now, these products, they have to be targeted, because, another thing that you have to consider is, tastes and preferences are changing as well. So taking too long could also mean missing the boat, or a customer or a competitor beating you to the marketplace, and you being kind of left out in the cold. So it's requiring a ramping up of speed to the market. Our third one: some traditional companies may not survive this radical change. Also true. I mean, think about some of the examples, some of the businesses that you've maybe seen go under, just in the last 5 to 10 years. J.C. Penney, um, you know, dominated for 100 years, and you know couldn't really survive in the technological age. Macy's, Gordman's, sort of the same thing. Then you've got Toys R Us, so you see Pomida, Shopko, more local examples. These mainstays in business, for 20, 30, 40 years, just couldn't do it, couldn't make it, could not survive the radical change market. And you're seeing other companies, out there as well, that are struggling. Think about Bath and Body Works, where they're burning through cash, just at an incredible rate, and doesn't look like they're going to be able to save it. And it's impressive. That while they're trying, the Gap is another one. These companies just haven't been able to, kind of survive. And while those companies haven't survived, other newer companies have entered the fray, entered the marketplace with more targeted tactics, more targeted products to it. There's one thing that you guys know me, sports guy, love walking into a Shields. It's super expensive, but think about how the products are targeted, in terms of just the team apparel that teenagers and kids and adults alike, the products are targeted to them, where some of these other clothing stores maybe really don't have that. And they're and they pay the price for it, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what giants of industry may not survive the next 10 years here, going forward. Offshore suppliers are changing the way we work. That's number 4 on our fundamental change. What will you be called on to deal with? The thing is too, is we talked about globalization earlier in this course, and globalization has really made the world smaller. There's a little snippet in this book I found fascinating. It's that Uruguay is, like, per capita, produces more like software programs than Silicon Valley, and it's like, whoa, like who would have thought that? Who would have thought that in give me, there's 197 countries, which nation provides the most software programs per capita? Uruguay would have not been on my top 20. And those offshore suppliers change the way that we do business, where if they can get produced cheaper in a nation such as Uruguay, it's going to force change for American software developers to develop an either far superior product, or two, develop a product that is going to be comparable in cost. And you think about the manufacturing jobs that have been lost here in the United States to other foreign governments, because of things like inability to inability to change, and not necessarily inability to change, but just not be able to meet some of the not in standards, but really, if we kind of get back to it, you think about the price, how much cheaper it is to do things, the wages that they have to pay employees overseas. American companies, American manufacturing companies, they couldn't keep up, because they'd be able to produce it so cheap, over in a foreign country, and then still get it here to the United States after tariffs and quotas, and they'd still be able to beat the price of what the U.S. made product was, and some of those businesses, those manufacturing plants were just like, man, we can't do it. We can develop a superior product, but right now the tastes and preferences of our customers is they'd rather have a more cost effective product. And those things are tough, and those offshore suppliers are certainly changing the way that we work. And then finally, last but not least, I think this is maybe the most interesting one. Knowledge, not information, is becoming the new competitive advantage. And just think about this for a minute. Knowledge, not information. And some people might sit there and think to yourself, well, knowledge and information, that's the same thing. But really it's not. Because information that is something that can be accessed very, very easily, via the web, social media, YouTube, all these channels, all these places. You can get information, but that knowledge, that know-how to adapt to change within within the marketplace, within the organization, the people, anybody can go Google something, right? Anybody can go out there and read about change, but if you don't have that knowledge in how to enact positive change within your organization, you're not going to be as successful. It's just that simple, where you need now people who have the knowledge, have the experience, the expertise to take that information. Okay, we're not dismissing the information piece here, but take that information and then move that information, turn that information into knowledge. And some of it you're just going to have to get through, with experience. There's information out there, that talks about running a business, adapting to change, but until you're actually in there and do it, it's one of those things that, just for me, nothing could have prepared me, for teaching in a pandemic, having to, do online learning, right? I absorbed a lot of information in 3.5 years in college, and nothing prepared me for that sort of, event, that sort of cataclysmic event, but as it happened, you gain that knowledge, you gain that understanding of like, okay, here's how we can make it work. So those, that's kind of the new competitive advantage. And I'm sure as you guys saw it as kids, we saw it as teachers, some teachers were just way better at the online learning thing than other teachers, and that's not to put down other teachers, but that was just the facts. Then that resulted in a competitive advantage for kids and students across America. And it's the same way in business. Think about remote work in business and how some businesses were able to keep their doors open, and sometimes even record profits in their organization during the pandemic. I mean, that's the CEO of Amazon didn't have a magic wand. He didn't have the knowledge of working in a pandemic. But they adapted, they changed. They gained that knowledge on the fly, and they turned in record profits while in the midst of that pandemic, and they had record hiring. So it's one of those things where that knowledge, that know-how, while sometimes gained on the fly, can become a huge competitive advantage within the business. So fundamental change, that's what you're going to be called on to deal with as you guys grow up, get into your first serious roles as managers, as you guys get into upper level university. And to think about it, it's one of those things too where you could apply all of these sort of ideas to teaching, as well, as I sit here and kind of think about some of the ways that change in education is happening, right? So it doesn't really matter anywhere you go, you're going to be able to apply these. All right, two types of change. So taking a look, there are two types of change. One of these is probably far more common than the other, and that being reactive change. That's responding to unanticipated problems and opportunities. And I think we have, and this is cheating a little bit, but the entire COVID pandemic was just one big reactive change to us. That was one thing where not a lot of individuals and businesses were ready to one, have their businesses shuttered. Think about restaurants all of a sudden just going like strictly curbside, or two, schools and other businesses just straight up going to remote work. Right? These were sort of reactive changes that were not exactly on the books or planned with businesses, and very much react. And some of them handled it, exceptionally well. Right? You talked about Amazon, Apple, Microsoft. These were companies that really, were able to, sort of turn and be successful. You think about, in town here, just within the Perry community. You think about how some businesses were able to be reactionary. You think about the restaurants. It's amazing. It's amazing that we didn't really lose a ton in terms of restaurants shuttering their shops in what was probably the most difficult time in American history for restaurants. Because there was no dine-in, right? So that reactive change and those individuals that were able to do that. It's think about how commendable that really is to be able to make that happen. So responding to that anticipated problem, but it's another thing too where reactive change, we shouldn't just live in the problem world. There can also be reactive, unanticipated, opportunities for for businesses. I think a lot of you guys saw it 2021, 2022, the and really the back half, not really 2022, but 2020, 2021, the back half of 2020 and really the early part of 2021, there was a boatload of opportunity in the stock market in terms of ability to make profit. And a lot of people were reactionary in that, and a lot of them were still able to cash in. Some people became too reactionary and ultimately ended up losing. But there is within opportunity, within the chaos, there is opportunity. And one of those opportunities that really popped up during the pandemic was real estate. You saw a lot of people that gobbled up real estate properties, turned them into rental properties, for people, and found a great way to give themselves some passive income. And then we take a look at proactive change, so anticipating the problems and opportunities. So this one, maybe not as widely publicized, where businesses are out there saying, "Hey, look at us! Look what we're doing proactively to change." And I think a lot of it too is sometimes always in kind of a negative, where you see a lot of times proactive change comes in the form of layoffs, where it's like, hey, we're not too sure on the economic situation over the next 1 to 2 years, so we're going to proactively, lay individuals off because we just don't think the numbers are going to be that good. So we think about that, but you also think about ways, that you can be proactive in terms of, handling events, in terms of, you think about like spring breakers in, Texas or Florida, right? Where, towns and cities that are impacted by mass people traveling to spring break, or they'll proactively have more security, they'll proactively hire more police officers, right? So they want to be proactive and anticipate those problems. And another one too is but again, we focus so quickly on the problems, but the opportunities, right? So think about just the auto industry. Where is the auto industry going to be 15, 20 years from now, right? Is it going to be all electric? Is gas cars, going to be, a thing of the past? Or, all of a sudden, are we 20 years from now looking at, oh, wait, maybe, hey, flying cars, like think about that, right? It seems crazy right now. But, if you think about 20 years ago, all electric cars probably weren't entering into the mindset or the fray of too many people back then there either. So, it's one of those things where, that proactive change, these businesses, how quickly can they pivot? And you think about, looking at the electric car thing, you think about how companies like Ford or Chevy could have maybe been a little bit more proactive in their development towards electronic vehicles, because right now you've as it stands in 2023, you've got really Tesla as kind of the top top cream of the crop, and then you've probably got Ford and Chevy and these other classic car companies kind of developing theirs, and then you've got some other you've got a few others kind of trailing behind, right? But had Ford and Chevy been a little bit more proactive with where this was going, had they only had the foresight maybe 10-15 years ago, maybe Tesla's not a thing. So you have to also think about that, because now it looks like Ford is Ford and Chevy are going to be duking it out with Tesla, for the foreseeable future, right? So, that proactive change, if you can be proactive with it, can really also prevent some of your fiercest competitors from entering the market. All right, the forces for change inside and outside the organization. This is on page 424 in your book. So the outside forces, you think about demographic factors, so age, education, skill level, gender, immigration. So we've talked a lot about these sort of demographic changers, right? This the United States, it's becoming a nation of it's becoming an older generation, right? The baby boomer generation is beginning to sort of age out, and we're not the population boom, birth rates are slowing across the U.S. So we're changing our demographics in that way. Education, more, there probably never been more people with college degrees, but even then we're starting to see right now as it stands, you know individuals who are people going to college right now as it stands, it's slowing, right? So how can the education demographic change? Skill level, in terms of where do our skills set? Is it more manufacturing, or are we becoming more of a software driven skill set where now it's we fix the computers that make the products, right? So the skill levels are going to change. You think about gender in terms of there are more women every single year entering law school and medical school than men, right? So the changing demographics there. And then the last one on the demographics part, immigration, right? This is becoming an increasingly diverse and multicultural country. So it's becoming the demographic characteristics are changing. Technological advancements, so manufacturing, automation, infotech. I mean, I think we've touched on it with a few different examples here. And I haven't even gotten my plug in yet for AI and why we need rules. But there it is. How is that changing? How is AI going to affect what we do? Going on. And then we've got shareholder, customer, broader stakeholder concerns. So changing customer preferences. You're seeing that we're becoming a little bit more segmented. We're becoming a little bit more niche with how we consume our goods and services. Domestic and international competition. Talked about that earlier with just how businesses in countries around the world are maybe able to do some things a little bit better than us, and that's caused American businesses to have to change scope and change focus in terms of what then we can do better than them. And to this point, we've been able to figure that sort of thing out. And then mergers and acquisitions. So companies combining about, I think in chapter 9 there's a question about T-Mobile and Sprint combining. So anytime you can see major companies getting together, there's always going to be some sort of outside force that change there. And then finally, the social and political pressures. So war, of course, values and leadership. You guys have all seen this, really within the last, 5 to 8 years in terms of, all of these political pressures, these social pressures affecting the change in our everyday world and lives. And then we've got human resource concerns. So unmet needs. So these are the inside forces. for change outside and inside the organization. So we look at the inside. So unmet needs of the worker, imperative that you take care of your workers. So what are those unmet needs, and then how can you best satisfy them? Job dissatisfaction, we went through a stretch there in 21, 22, and even a little bit in 23, where this thing called quiet quitting was happening, where people were so dissatisfied with their job that they were just doing the bare minimum. And you know it was just kind of a, hey, like, I'm going to do what I'm expected, but that's it. That's all you're getting out of me. And it was kind of a way to show businesses that, hey, like, we're dissatisfied. We have needs that are unmet. It doesn't feel like you're really taking us seriously on this. We need to see these. We need to see these needs met. So job dissatisfaction, absenteeism, and turnover. So anytime you're missing work, anytime you're leaving a job, bringing those in, I mean, that puts a strain on everybody else in terms of picking up the slack or having to accommodate and sort of not accommodate, but more acclimate a new employee into the business. Those are forces for change. And sometimes too, if you get more skilled employees in, it can be a positive force for change. So it can go either way. Productivity. So productivity is a human resource concern. Obviously, a dip in productivity is never good. But what are ways and focuses that we can help our workers become more productive? And then finally, participation and then suggestion. So one of those things with organizations, the participations and suggestions piece. How can businesses make them feel that they have a voice within their organization and that it can be heard? And then managers' behavior is another inside force. So conflict. So what's the relationship with your employees? How do you get along or maybe not get along? So what does that conflict look like? Leadership styles. Does your manager's leadership style clash or elevate your workers? Reward systems. So what is the reward systems in terms of bonuses, prizes, things like that? What is that within your organization? And then the structural reorganization of a company can also be a factor as well. So this all drives the need for change. And as you guys can see, a lot of factors there from the outside and the inside forces. So again, we kind of go back to this idea that the only thing constant in business is change. And you see that rarely, if ever, are any of these sort of forces driving change, are they ever going to be just squared away and yep, we're good? Like, demographics not changing. No, right? It's gonna be one of those things where it's always moving, it's always changing, and businesses have to sort of contend with that. And the ones that do it better are ultimately the ones that are more successful. All right, we take a look here as we get into 10-2. We take a look at the forms and models of change. So 3 forms of change from least threatening to most threatening. We're going to take a Lewin's change model: unfreezing, changing, and then refreezing. We'll take a look at that one. And then we'll take a systems approach to change. So we're going to take a look at these here in section 10-2. And you take a look here and we see the least threatening change as what we call adaptive change. Adaptive change is, we've seen stuff like this before. So I want you to think about this for a minute. Adaptive change. So, as we record this, it's tax season, right? It's March of 2023. You know, accountants have to be a little bit more adaptive in terms of what they're doing, and that means they're probably working longer hours right now because a lot of people bringing their taxes, their tax documents to their tax accountants, and you see this influx of demand for these individuals, and they have to adapt, they have to change, right, to serve all of their clients. So this is the least threatening because they see this stuff before, right? They see this every single year where they have to be adaptive. It's easy to implement. It's the least threatening to employees. It's stressful because you're working more, but again, they've seen this before. Somewhat threatening, innovative change. So this is something new for this company. Okay, so when we think about innovative change, we've been kind of talking about we've been talking about cars a little bit in this screencastify. Think about the innovative change that went on for Ford and Chevy, where they for so long have been producing gas powered vehicles. Think about Ford with the Model T. They've been doing it for 110 years, and all of a sudden electric vehicles kind of coming into the fray. And while this could be a very threatening change, which we'll talk about, radical innovation change, it becomes innovative change for Ford because this is something new for this company where they've now all of a sudden developed, they're beginning to develop their own version of the electric car. So it's an innovative change. It's somewhat threatening. It's somewhat threatening in that, they're maybe not the first mover to it. It's something new for the company, but it is somewhat threatening. It is innovative change. And then that leads us to this kind of this gray area of very threatening, which is radically innovative change. So there's kind of this push and pull between innovative and radically innovative. So this is a brand new thing in our industry, is kind of the last one, where, all of a sudden, right now, maybe in the car industry, at one point in time, electric cars would have been the radically innovative change, where, the first Tesla that ever got unveiled, that would have been a radically innovative change, where for the first time we would have been like, oh, holy moly, like electric car, who would have thought, right? Like, we can't believe this, right? So, that would have been, the first working Tesla, that probably would have been an example of radically innovative change. Now, again, as more companies have been able to enter the fray, now it's just more of an innovative change, where, today, if we're in the car company and somebody comes out and says, hey, flying car, we've got it, that would be a game changer, right? That would be an absolute game changer in terms of, all right, flying car, this is going to work. This is going to, get people from point A to point B. It's going to do it safely, fully verifiable. It's going to work, right? That would be a radically innovative change, because that would change the way car companies would do business forever, right? So that's an example of radically innovative change. Another maybe radically innovative change that you could see right now, maybe a little bit more appropriate, self-driving cars, right? Where, Tesla's kicking around the technology for it to work. They haven't really been super successful yet with it, but it's radically innovative, in terms of, who would have thought, the car can, just drive itself. It's been the stuff and speculation of sci-fi movies for what seems like 30 years now, but all of a sudden it's just this radically innovative idea and this change that's going on. So, these are the three forms of change: least threatening to most threatening. All right, and then we take a look at Lewin's change model: unfreezing, changing, and then refreezing. So the unfreezing stage. So in the unfreezing stage, managers try to instill in employees the motivation to change, encouraging them to let go of attitudes and behaviors that are resistant to innovation. For this unfreezing to take place, employees need to become dissatisfied with the old way of doing things. Managers also need to reduce barriers to change during this time. So, this has to be kind of and you'll find in business, if you ever end up managing employees or become employees yourself, the employees, they have to be on board with the change. We're, as humans, we're naturally resistant to change, and it becomes kind of this process really works when both sides are unhappy a little bit of just the way things are. So, this kind of becomes this unthawing, this unfreezing time, maybe getting rid of, past conceptions, past ideas, and then, becoming a little bit more flexible. So that's the unfreezing phase. The changing ways, so that's the learning the new ways of doing. So in the changing phase, employees need to be given the tools for change. So new information, perspectives, new models of behavior. Managers can help here by providing benchmark results, role models, mentors, experts, and training. Okay. And again, this is where, employees naturally, they're dismissive to change. They don't like change. This becomes the changing part, where if this model truly works, this is where you have to get it right, in terms of you have to have the people, your employees on board, with the change. They have to be able to take the training, take, the mentorship, the experts, they have to be in accordance and in agreement with, maybe what are some of the benchmarking. And then, it's ultimately businesses are going to be more successful if they have, people who are open to change in an organization, or able to sell the openness to change within an organization, right? So then the changing, and then finally, last but not least, on the refreezing, right? With the refreezing, in this stage, employees need to be helped to integrate the changed attitudes and behaviors into their normal ways of doing. And then managers can assist by encouraging employees to exhibit the new change, and then through additional coaching and modeling, reinforcing the employees in the desired change. And so then with that refreezing, then this just becomes the new normal, right? This is just the way that we do it. Think about, I think about teaching. We haven't always had power school, to take attendance, take lunch counts, do grades, right? It was done by hand. It was done by attendance cards, that had to be delivered to the office. Grades were, done in a grade book and a report card, all done by hand, right? So, it's inevitable that we had, teachers that were resistant to change. It's the way they've always done it. It's the way we're always going to do it, right? So there had to be this unfreezing, and then this changing, this training of like, okay, here's how you use Power School. Like, this is how you put the grades in. This is how you do this and that and the other, right? And then the refreezing, and now it's like, 25 years on, with Power School, or however long it's been, it's like, oh yeah, okay, like this is just the new normal. Like, nobody would ever think to, no new teacher's ever going to walk in and be like, yeah, let's just take this, let's just take these attendance cards down to the office. We're going to take it by hand, or we're going to calculate all the grades by hand too. It's not the way we do business anymore. Although you can probably still find a few teachers that write the grade book down for grades. Not to disparage them, but you can probably still see it. But they're probably not the new teachers on the block. Here you can see the figure 10.2, Lewin's model of change. So the unfreezing, the changing, and then the refreezing. And again, this is sometimes a little bit of a process too, in terms of, it's not always, this is how it's going to be forever. But it is definitely a cycle, a little bit of a process. All right, we take a look at a systems change to approach. The book does a pretty good job on page 430 of taking a look at some of the inputs, and really does a nice graphic organizer of how this one works. So the inputs are the first step. So why should we change, and how willing and able are we to change? So you think about the input. So this is the mission statement, the vision statement, the strategic plan analysis of the organization's readiness for change. So those are the inputs. Then there's the target elements of change. So which levers can we pull that will produce the change that we want? And if you take a look at those levers, some of those levers are people, organizational arrangements, the methods, the social factors. But a couple important notes with that. Any change made in each and every target element will ripple across the entire organization. So it just won't be housed in that one bubble. Ultimately, it'll be felt and impacted everywhere. And then consequently, all organization change ultimately affects the people in it, and vice versa. So, you have to be kind of careful with how you use those levers in your systems approach to change. Because, just as an example, you think about maybe if you decide that layoffs are the way to go, and, all of a sudden you lay off a guy who, the best employee you have, well, that was his best friend in the office, that's going to have a ripple effect, maybe on the productivity of the business, whether, that best employee, feels it or not, it's a natural human emotion to not feel great when your best buddy is maybe laid off. Right. So, just to kind of think about those target elements of change, and then ultimately the outputs. What results do we want from this change? So you got to have, change that may be designed to occur at the level of the organization, the group, the individual, right? So all of these outputs, it's ultimately what's the end goal, what's the end product that we want to see. So, that system, has to be there. And, and you see on the bottom there in the notes, so it's, a system is a set of interrelated parts that operate together to achieve a common purpose, right? These are not standalone ideas. It's an approach used to diagnose what to change and determine the success of the change. And then, of course, we just talked about these three elements, these three efforts. And then last but not least, within the change model, you have the feedback. All right. And this feedback piece, it seems like, well, passe, like, or not passe, but it seems like, well, yeah, no kidding. Like feedback, you're going to want to hear it. But that's the thing is you got to actually take the feedback seriously. You have to take about the feedback of, how is the change working? What do we need to change? Then we also have force field analysis. So which force facilitates the change and which resists it. So, are maybe the methods, the facilitating a change, but maybe it's the people that are resisting it. Maybe it's the social factors that are a little bit resistant to the people. What's the change, and then applying a systems model of changes. It's one of those things where, again, we've talked about all those factors that affect and maybe constitute change, and just how difficult it could be. Here you see that systems approach to change. So again, reference that it is on page 430 for your viewing pleasure. All right, slide 15, organizational development. What is it and what can it do? So what can organizational development be used for? How OD works, and then the effectiveness of OD. So let's go ahead and get right into it. But we probably should define organizational development. So it is a set of techniques for implementing planned change to make people and organizations more effective. So that is the baseline definition, and we're going to take a look at what it can be used for. So what can organizational development be used for? So improving individual, team, and organizational performance. So the way we develop our business that we run, can improve how individuals work, ultimately how the team works, and then ultimately how the organization performs. It can also be a revitalizing effort for organizations. So revitalizing in terms of changing the way that we've done things. Think about like a facelift or something like that. In terms of, maybe we've become stagnant with the way that we've done things. So maybe we can sort of reinvent ourselves a little bit on the fly, revitalize ourselves, in order to kind of drive forward. Because you got to remember, organizations over time definitely have to change. And then you think about this last one here, what can OD be used for? Adapting to mergers. So you think about companies like Sprint and T-Mobile, and they came together to be part as one company. And you think about different maybe cultural aspects, the different way things were done at these places. You really have to be able to adapt to those places, those individuals, and that can be tough. That can be tough to do. So organizational development can sort of help bridge that gap. And then you can kind of see here. So improving, so conflict probably is the most inherent in most organizations. So sometimes an organizational development expert sometimes can really be an executive coach, can help advise on improving relationships or other issues within the organization. They say guys of that, because the last thing you want is to come in there and say, hey, your organization, your culture is crappy. We need you to change this, right? So sometimes you kind of have to put the pill in the steak thing for the dog, and get them healthy that way. So I don't want to say trick, but yes, sometimes you have to kind of trick them. Revitalizing the organization. So technology is changing so rapidly. Nearly all modern organizations have to adapt to new ways of doing things in order to survive. So that can help by openly communicating, fostering innovation, dealing with the stress of that. And then mergers and acquisitions. So there's stress, there's anxiety, there's turnover, there's decreased productivity. It's called upon in those situations to kind of help integrate the two firms, the cultures, the products, and the procedures. All right. So how does it work? So first thing, diagnosing. So diagnosing, what is the problem? So to carry out the diagnosis, consultants or managers use some combination of questionnaires, surveys, interviews, meetings, records, direct observation to ascertain what the heck the problem is, and identify the problem areas. So problem is defined to be a gap between the outcome or result desired by managers and the actual status of the outcome poor results. Got to diagnose it. Step 2, intervention. So what are we going to, or intervention. Step 2, intervention. I'll say it again. Step 2, intervention. What shall we do about it? So the treatment, all right, this is like the medicine. The intervention, this is the attempt to correct the diagnosed problem. So it's often done using the services of a consultant in organizational development who works in conjunction with the management team. And then evaluation. How well has the intervention, I said it again, intervention worked? An OD program needs objective evaluation to see if it's done any good. So the answer may lie in hard data about absenteeism, turnovers, grievances, profitability, which should be compared with earlier statistics. So the change agent can use questionnaires, surveys, and the like to assess the changes in employee attitudes, right? So, again, the nice thing with OD and how it works, you really can see it with the mood within the organization, the outputs, the profitability, the productivity, and so on. And then finally, the feedback. How can diagnosis and intervention be further refined? So if evaluation shows the diagnosis was wrong or the intervention was not effective, the OD consultant or managers need to return to the beginning to rethink these 2 steps, right? So, if it doesn't work at first, try again, but again, be open to the feedback and the change. The effectiveness of organizational development. So multiple interventions. So it tends to be successful when using multiple interventions. So goal setting, feedback, recognition and rewards, training, participation, and the challenging job design have had good growth, have had good results in improving performance and satisfaction. Makes sense. People like to be recognized and rewarded for the work, and ultimately they're more. The way to get recognized and be rewarded for your work is strong training programs and being able to participate, and people feeling challenged within their jobs. So those can improve satisfaction. But you need managerial support. So you need top managers on board with this. If top management isn't unsold, they're not going to give you the resources to do it. So you need the managerial support to make it happen. So that feedback during the change process is one way to demonstrate the support. So using it, actually, not just saying, oh yeah, here it is. So you need that management support within it. Also, you need to have goals geared towards both the short and long term. So change programs have had more success when they're oriented towards achieving both short-term and long-term goals. Managers should not engage in organizational change for the sake of change. Change efforts should produce positive results. And I think that's a key point there, right? We shouldn't just change the change, right? Something needs to set off set off the change, whether, maybe it's, again, being proactive in terms of, hey, we see this opportunity, maybe, we'd like to attack and try for this organization, this opportunity. Totally acceptable. Really, again, shouldn't engage for the sake of, engagement. And then organizational development is affected by culture. So it's affected by cross-cultural considerations. Thus, an organizational development intervention that worked in one country should not be blindly applied to a similar situation in another country. Okay, have to be aware of where you are at from a cultural perspective. That can definitely affect the effectiveness of your of whatever it is that you're trying to change within the organizational development of a company. The organizational development process, you can see this here on page 436. So the diagnosis comes first, the intervention then becomes step 2, evaluation 3, and then finally, last but not least, you see the 4th portion of that, which becomes the feedback, right? So that's the process. This is what it looks like. That's ultimately how it should be run. All right, organizational innovation. As we take a look and go down the line here, organizational innovation as we get into 10.4 here. So we take a look at product and process innovation, and these are the 2 that we're gonna take a look at. But I think this table is really effective in terms of kind of giving you some great examples. And this table is on 439. So you think about product and improvement. So the Apple iPhone. So 11 generations, versions, and not even 11 anymore. I think we're up to like 15 since the first introduction. So that's a product improvement. But a product that goes in a completely new direction. And hey, we talked about it earlier, driverless cars. So that'd be a major major automobile manufacturing, that'd be a change, right? So that'd be a new direction and really just a whole new product. And then the process and improvement. So 3D printing, you know, whether it's 3D printing used in a manufacturing process, and believe it or not, I saw it the other day. Manufacture 3D printing food. I couldn't believe it. But it's an improvement. It's a process improvement. And then a process and new direction would be home construction. So panelized homes would be a totally new direction from where we're at now. So you think about these two different types: product versus process, and both of them have their niche, their place in the innovation of organizations and the innovation of products. So really, this is the big picture. Innovation occurs when a new solution to an existing problem is valuable enough that consumers are willing to pay for it. So that's the example. So types, approaches to innovation. So again, type of innovation, the focus of innovation. Can innovation go too far? So type of innovation. So managers often need to improve a product or service they offer in response to competition or customer feedback. This response often amounts to technological innovation. A product innovation is a change in the appearance or functionality performance of a product or service, or the creation of a new one. A process innovation is a change in the way a new product or service is conceived, manufactured, or distributed. The focus of the innovation. So improvement innovations enhance or upgrade an existing product, service, or process. These types of innovations are often incremental and are less likely to generate new significant amounts of new revenue at this one point in time. So, but then new direction innovation, totally new or different approach to a product, service, process, or industry. These innovations focus on creating new markets, and customers rely on developing breakthroughs and inventing things that didn't already exist. And then, can they go too far? All innovations, all innovations good innovations, or is it possible for innovation to cross the line? That's a question businesses will continue to confront as technology evolves and allows us to do things that were once possible. This seems like a good place to stop. And again, once I mentioned AI, we probably need rules for it. So can it go too far? We'll see. Again, we've been talking about it, the way artificial intelligence going right now. It feels like the plot of the first two Terminator movies, but we're going to have to see how it plays out. An innovation system, the supporting forces for innovation. So need to create an innovation strategy. So many companies fail in their improvement efforts because they lack a strategy of innovation. So an innovation strategy, which amounts to a plan for being more innovative, requires company to integrate its innovation activities into its business strategy. So not just being innovative to be innovating, but how can we use the innovations? How can we actually get it into the fiber and fabric of our company to actually, make it be effective? Commitment from senior leaders. So common theme when it comes to change within an organization. You need commitment from the people at the top, because those people ultimately are the ones responsible for allocating the resources, that can allow, things like organizational development and innovation to, thrive. And you really need their commitment. Foster an innovation culture and climate. So, with this one, and it's probably easiest to put it this way, by not punishing failure, right? So, allow failings to happen, not, hey, if you miss this, you're fired. That's a one way to really, really stifle innovation, having that culture of, hey, continuous improvement, not every idea you're going to come up with is going to work is going to work the first time, so fostering that innovation culture and climate, really, really important. And then required structure and processes. So organizational structure, internal processes can promote if they foster collaboration, cross-functional communication, and agility. Organizational processes are an organization's capabilities and management, internal processes and technology that turns inputs into outcomes. So crowdsourcing can be defined as a practice of obtaining needed services, ideas, content by soliciting contributions from a large group of people, typically via the internet, and is being more and more used by more and more companies to help innovate. So again, just that structure, that process for how businesses innovate. All right. an innovation system for the supporting forces for innovation. So develop the necessary human capital. So again, remember we defined it as the potential, productive potential of an individual's knowledge and action, and then research has identified several employee characteristics to help those organizations innovate. So you need to have the necessary people. Then you need to have HR policies, practices, and procedures that allow and align with the related values outcomes. So the performance management and incentives, you know, are oftentimes not designed to foster innovation, right? Or it's more of a a punishment if you fail, right? So you have to be more receptive to ideas rather than again punishing failure. So important if you ever end up owning it and running your own business. Components of the innovation system. So you can kind of see this one here. You can see the components of these innovation systems here on page 441 in your book. So some of the different things. So the strategy, the appropriate resources, the HR policies, the necessary capital, required structures, processes, the culture, and then the committed leadership, all of those things. If you can have all of those things, that ultimately gives you the best chance to lead for effective innovation within your organization. All right, the threat of change, as we're getting closer here to the end of chapter 10, threat of change. So managing employees in the big picture. So we'll talk about the resistance to change, and then the 10 reasons why employees resist change. So the causes of resistance to change, you can see this here. So employee characteristics, change agent characteristics, and then change agent employee relationship. Those things can ultimately inhibit and cause a resistance to change within those organizations. So individual differences, actions, inactions, and the perceptions of change make up our employee characteristics. Change agents. So the characteristics of the change agent. So the individual who is a catalyst in helping the organization change also consist of his or her individual differences, experiences, actions, inactions. Such characteristics that might contribute to employee resistance to change include leadership style, personality, tactfulness, sense of timing, awareness of culture, traditions, or group relationships, and the ability to empathize with an employee's perspective. And then, as you might expect, the relationship between those two, the change agent and the employees and their characteristics, ultimately are going to be the most effective in terms of whether or not a business becomes successful and if they are able to successfully change. All right, and then our top 10 reasons why employees are resistant to change. So individuals' predisposition towards change. So how people react to change depends on a lot on how they learn to handle change and ambiguity as kids. Step 2, the surprise and fear of the unknown. 3, the climate of mistrust within an organization. If it's a high climate of mistrust, that's going to ultimately believe that this is not going to succeed. Fear of failure. So naturally, something new ultimately increase the increased odds of failure come into play. The loss of job, loss of status, or job security can be another resistance. Peer pressure in terms of managers. Higher ups coming down, talking about, hey, this is going to happen, whether you like it or not. That sort of peer pressure can cause resistance to change. Disruption of cultural traditions or group relationships. You think about that with like a merger, where a new culture, a new organization kind of comes in, takes you over, things change. Personality conflicts, lack of tact, poor timing, and then non-reinforcing reward systems are another example of why people might be resistant to change. So as we end here, as we end with chapter 10, change obviously a very important factor within an organization, and ultimately how that organization deals with change can really account for the long-term success of that organization. So good luck this week with your quiz on chapter 10. Good luck this week with the project day. Only 18 questions this week. Much better than chapter 9. So everybody, thank you for listening. Whenever you may listening to this, early day, mid-afternoon, or late evening, everybody take it easy. We'll see you next week with chapter 11.